The South Pacific nation of Kiribati is a remote collection of islands scattered along the equator across a distance the width of the United States. From the turquoise lagoons, you'd never guess that these islands were the scene of one of the bloodiest battles in U.S. Marine Corps history. Today, the island nation is being put on the map again as the first country to be erased from it. People in Kiribati, as it's known here, live just beyond the dateline. Every day, they're among the first to see the sunrise. As one of the world's lowest-lying nations, they're also among the first to confront the impacts of climate change. Abayang, one of the outer islands of Kiribati, has 6,000 residents who live almost entirely off of the land and sea. Our first stop is Tabukanako. Back in the 1970s, it was a thriving coastal village and the site of one of Abayang's main harbors. Today, it looks like this.
Behind me, you can kind of see the remains. This area has now been flooded. You can see where the water started to enter.
The foundations are all that's left of the 200 households that once lived around this cove. Rising tides have eroded the coasts and contaminated the fresh water supply. Many of Abayang's residents have abandoned their homes and scattered across the 33 islands of Kiribati.
Do you see that, the coconut tree?
Mm-hmm.
There?
Yeah.
And that's all the papaya beach. All of papaya beach in that area.
Wow.
The bananas, bandanas, fruit fruits, yeah.
How does it feel to see it underwater?
Very surprising.
Are you scared for the rest of Abayang?
Yes.
This church and Manyeba, or community center, were built over a decade ago. Today, the area has been abandoned to flooding, but the people of Tabukanako hope to preserve these two structures.
The people in the side of the Buginako Lagoon, they already gone to the mainland because 200 meters of their land disappear. And the people that live there remove and separate.
Right now we're experiencing a total inundation of areas that previously were not vulnerable to normal tides, and we're getting something that we call king tides, which are actually extreme high tides. These were non-existent, even when I was a young boy.
Andrew Team is the president's senior advisor on climate change.
It's no longer a question of if we will remain in the country forever. It's a matter of when we will have to leave, because the science is actually very clear.
So what is the science saying?
The basic physics of climate change is very clear and very simple. If the whole ocean expands and if the whole ocean increases in temperature, the volume will expand. The other part of the story is that if the whole ice in both the north and the southern and the mountain areas actually melt, all that volume of ice will end up as water in the oceans. So if this actually turns out to be true, then maybe we wouldn't have more than the rest of this century to stay here.
What is the government doing right now for Kiribati people who are affected by climate change?
We need to start worrying about what happens to the total population. Where do they go? How will they settle down? Will they be treated as refugees? Can they be treated as refugees?
Kiribati President Enote Tong has lobbied for binding international treaties to cut carbon emissions for over a decade. He's grown impatient with the lack of urgency he's seen from industrialized nations as the tides continue to rise on his home.
As a global community, we need to talk about carbon emission levels. We need to talk about temperature rises. But in fact, what will be achieved once those agreements are reached is of no consequence to our situation, because we are already being impacted and will continue to be impacted whatever the agreements reached at the international level.
Why is this something that's personal to you, not as the president of Kiribati, but as a family man?
I have children, I have a lot of grandchildren. With the scenarios being put forward by climate scientists, I think there is real danger in their future. If nothing is done to raise the level of the islands above the rising seas, then the reality would be that we have to relocate our people. And so we are preparing for that.
Tong is one of the world's first presidents forced to plan the gradual demise of his country due to climate change. Faced with the need to move its people en masse, the government of Kiribati is sending citizens abroad to Australia and New Zealand for job and skills training, preparing them for when they'll have to leave for good. They call the effort Migration with Dignity.
I wouldn't want to migrate and be classified as a refugee anywhere. I really prefer to move to an area where I can settle down and act like anybody else in that society.
Only the Fiji government and the people have definitely come forward to say, yes, we will assist Kiribati if ever there is reason for them to relocate. No other nation, no other country has ever come forward with that.
Just a few miles from the Kiribati parliament, the village of Eta stands amidst an ever-rising swamp. Residents fear it may soon face the same fate as the underwater villages of Abayang. The home of 15-year-old Rupe was once an oceanside sanctuary until more frequent king tides engulfed the property. Now her family lives in a perpetual state of construction, building and rebuilding seawalls to fortify their children and livelihoods.
If you recall earlier, there were about 20 meters of beach here and some of Rupe's family members building a wall. Now there's about 2 meters worth of water and flooding in some of the areas just behind the wall.
Rupe's family hopes to send her overseas for a better life.
Where are we?
Yeah. Kiribati. Yeah.
Okay. But where will you go in New Zealand?
Auckland and then.
They haven't been selected for the government's Migration with Dignity program, so they're making their own arrangements.
Yeah, auntie there, she's trying to find a way through the immigration in the adoption, yes, so that she can live with her in New Zealand.
Are you excited?
Yeah, excited, but sad
What are you sad about missing here?
about missing our places, missing our parents, friends.
Rupe's grandmother fears for the family's future here in Eta.
We have tried to build up the seawall many times, but still broken.
Yeah, they broke it.
Yeah.
Where would you guys want to go?
Don't know. And that's just a safe place.
Yes.
As climate change forces families to relocate, nearly half the country's population has moved to the nation's capital island of South Tarawa. This mass migration has made it one of the most populated areas on Earth, with a density similar to that of Tokyo or Gaza. The overcrowding has caused other problems, like pollution, disease, and poor sanitation, problems that may further threaten the fresh water supply.
It's like walking through a minefield here. The rising tide isn't just bringing water, it's also bringing tons and tons of trash. That, combined with the thousands of people who are moving to higher ground, is threatening the little bit of land that's still left.
We already had our developmental challenges. Waste disposal, solid waste disposal is a problem. The utilities are stressed, and so we have all of that. And this is being compounded by the fact that we have to attend to the challenges of climate change.
Temaiku is one of the most vulnerable sites in South Tarawa. It's also just a few short miles from the island's primary freshwater aquifer. A single wave across this thin strip of land could leave the water supply contaminated for up to 2 years.
This place is get battered by seawater every high tide. See the many seawalls that they have, that from the different times that the tide has come to wash them away, and they keep building, rebuilding, and rebuilding.
Pelanise Alofa is a community organizer who helps Pacific Islanders deal with the impact of the rising sea. Much of her focus is on the over 60% of the Kiribati population under 30. These young people could be the last generation to live on these islands.
What would you want young Kiribati people who live in other countries to know about the country that they are not able to live in?
I want them to know that they used to come from a very beautiful country in the world. They got the most beautiful ocean, you know. If wherever they go, they will never have this kind of ocean anymore. And they will never have that connection with their people, with their land that they used to have.
For Pelanise, the current threat of displacement has an element of deja vu. Her family is from the Kiribati island of Banaba, where in the 1940s, residents were forcibly relocated to Fiji by a British mining company.
We lost touch of the island, our island in Kiribati, because the company took over and they just mined almost everything away. For an indigenous person, you always have that spiritual connection to your land. And the connection really is through your ancestors, they come up with the stories of who we are as Kiribati people, right from the beginning.
How would you feel if you had to leave your ancestors here in Kiribati?
I do not want anyone ever to experience, forced migration, because we were actually forced to leave. And I do not want anyone, because of climate change, to leave their country.
Despite the challenges, the Kiribati people are finding ways to resist their fate.
We plant mangroves to protect our coast, our land. You see, when you plant these kind of mangroves, they are like wave breakers.
How long does it take to grow?
A few weeks, we start bearing roots.
Mangrove trees can grow in salty water and are an affordable way for communities to preserve their coastline.
And so it's protecting the sand from erosion. We said it's a seed, right? When it falls this way. This way. And so that's why they grow. See, all these ones, they fall from this and it just gets stuck in the soil and grow. So what we do, we just go in and collect all this and distribute it among our youth, and we start planting 3 at a time.
Florine and Taranga are determined to save their school and their island.
We have done a report for investigating whether the coastal erosion is really exists in our area, especially behind our school.
Florine began to research her school's receding coastline when she noticed that the beach she used to play on was quickly disappearing.
So you guys are very focused on collecting the evidence
Yes.
that proves climate change.
Yes, not only the walls, but only the trees and the sand, whether we can know whether the sand have been washed away.
But without international support, they know that their efforts will not be enough.
We found out that the outer countries, they have bigger factories than us.
Yes.
And that factory is actually also contributing to the climate change. So we would like to ask for a
Request.
helping hand to the bigger countries.
Train together.
Yeah, train together.
In cooperating, not to do so much industry or whatever.
Yeah.
As you can understand, my greatest concern was for my people. What is to be the future of our young people? In the early stages, my answer would have been nothing. There is nothing we can do. It's beyond our control. But I couldn't accept that because it's not good enough. We got to come forward with innovative solutions.
As a country without industry, Kiribati has no carbon emissions to cut. What they do have is tuna. And in an effort to set an example for industrialized nations, President Tong launched the Phoenix Island Protected Area, or PIPA, a marine reserve that would secure the world's tuna supply for future generations.
We thought that we would do this as part of our statement to the international community that, yes, all nations have to make sacrifices in order to address the issue of climate change, no matter how desperately we need the revenue from this. Nevertheless, it is our contribution.
Yet despite their willingness to sacrifice, neither the people of Kiribati nor their government have the leverage to change the country's fate. In 2015, the international community will convene at the UN Climate Summit in Paris. It is hoped that they will set binding targets for countries to cut carbon emissions, an agreement that won't be implemented until 2020. For low-lying island nations, these measures will be too little, too late.
Climate change, even if it impacts Kiribati right now and is undermining our development and all that, it's not about Kiribati alone. It's about our whole world.
Here we are testing the human values. How do people respond when they find others in a situation like this?
And we may be on the front line going down first. It will reach everyone right in the end.